This is one of my recipes that I came up with, and I call it coconut beer ramen noodles. Absolute goodness. Now, I add a little bit of coconut milk to a pan or pot, whatever you want to call that. It looks like a pot, but some people can call it a pan. And then I add some minced garlic to it right there. Now, this is going to add to the flavoration tremendously. Now, I also like spice, so in order to get that spice, I add a little bit of chili oil to this, and I'm just going to let it simmer just a little bit, not overcook it, just simmer just a little bit. Once it comes to a simmer, I'm going to stir it to make sure all of the ingredients get permeated properly. And you'll notice that the color will start to turn a slight red. Next, I'm going to add some of my favorite beer to it. Just pour it along into it. Make sure that the amount of beer replaces the amount of water that I would have put into it. Now, adding beer is going to add to the flavoration tremendously. So after I added the beer, I'm just going to pull out the block of ramen noodles to let it air out just slightly. I'm going to separate it from the flavoration packet, and I'm going to add the block of ramen noodles to the pot, pan, whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to pour the seasonization packet on top so the permibration can begin. Take my thongs, flip it, and you'll notice that it'll start to foam up a little bit. That's just the carbonation from my favorite beer that I put in there. Now, if it starts to rise up and looks like it's going to overflow, you may want to turn down the heat just a little bit in the kitchen. Absolute goodness. All right, so this is starting to permeate. I am heating it back up to bring it back to a boil so the noodles can cook to al dente. And once they begin cooking, I'm just going to take my thongs and flip it. Just make sure that they're cooking evenly and on their way to al dente. Absolute goodness. Now you can take your thongs and you can separate them a little bit. This will assist in the process of cooking the ramen noodles. And you'll notice that the scent of the coconut milk, the pepper, the garlic, and my favorite beer will start to permeate in the kitchen and start to smell good. Now, if it starts to boil up too high, remember you can always turn it down to keep it from overflowing. Look at the noodles just dancing around in there. Absolute goodness. I'm just going to take my thongs and just make sure that they're cooking evenly. And they're almost done. You can see that it's starting to bubble rate a little bit more, almost coming to the top. Keep my eye on it to make sure that it does not overflow. And pull them out. Alright, so now it's time to add the coconut beer ramen noodles to the bowl. I'm first gonna pull out the noodles, and then I'm just gonna add as much broth as I want to. Now this will have a sweet, savory, beery, ramen noodle-y, chickeny, oniony flavoration to it. And the only reason why it's having oniony flavoration to it is because I'm adding green onion. Green onion is a great addition to add to the end of this recipe. Take your spork and dive in. Absolute goodness, if you ask me.